What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats and our Mover of the Year for 2022 feature on Travis Kelce, tight end of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I love all the deep dives that I get to do on our Mover of the Year and within our Mover of the Year analysis, but this one has become my favorite. I started it last year with Jonathan Taylor, our 2021 Mover of the Year. I continued it in the spring with Saquon Barkley. And then now I'm going to get back up into it here with Travis Kelce. What would happen if he and I ever partnered together? What would his craft look like? What would I envision would unfold within the learning and practice environment? And what types of things would I emphasize based on my analysis, my video and film analysis that I've done up to this point, really getting into what gaps, what weaknesses that I still feel as though he possesses, but also really trying to harness who he is as an authentic mover. And hence the reason why I always talk about one becoming one with, whether it's myself locking arms in the facilitation of movement skill with a player or the player themselves aiming to become one with their environment. And I want to start there, as I typically would, really trying to reframe this movement problem solver paradigm. Out of this paradigm, how do we view movement and movement skill? And particularly, what does that mean? What implications are there for our practice design and our learning environments? Let's rewind back to Bernstein, 1996, Dexterity and Movement Skill, where he talked about dexterity being about the ability to find or coordinate, control, and organize the most functional movement solution for any emerging movement problem, under any situation and under any condition. And of course, this is what we would be chasing in this problem solver paradigm. Now, of course, when we're talking about the most skillful mover in the National Football League, per who I am deeming to be the most skillful mover, we know that Travis Kelce already has the ability to express high levels of dexterity. Again, Bernstein said in 96, dexterity is not confined within the movements or actions themselves, but instead it is revealed in how these movements will behave in their interaction. It's about that becoming one with type of process. So an interaction with the problem, an interaction with the environment and all of its challenges, all of the constraints, and how we always talk about context shaping content and the two reciprocally feeding into one another. And of course, the unexpectedness and surprises. So Travis Kelce, again, in my analysis, I believe that he represents this highest level of dexterity among the 1,696 in the NFL. Across situations, across conditions. So when problems change, when the environment changes, Travis Kelce is equally adept at being able to coordinate, control, and organize a movement solution that is functionally fit to the respective problem. And the thing that makes him do what he does, at least that which what underlies or underpins this ability to be this dexterous, is his form of life. His ability to honestly and authentically express himself in a Bruce Lee type of fashion, to use no way as the way and really have no limitations when he moves and how he moves. And this, to me, if you've gone through our Mover of the Year analysis for 2022, you will realize that this is where Travis Kelce's movement skill really circles the wagon around, right? Him being the creating, authentic, and honest individual, being more important than what someone tells him to do or how someone tells him how to do it. So it really isn't even, sometimes he's just out there on the fly, creating a novel, authentic movement solution. And those most skillful movers who have the capability of doing that are often those who really have no limitations. They aren't set into their ways. But that being said, there are still some things that we would like to do with Travis Kelce. However, we would like to harness this. if this is really what his form of life is about and who he is about, so when I say form of life, I really just mean one's personal paradigm, that personal paradigm, how they think, what they believe, how they aim to behave, these types of things, we want to lift up in our learning environment. We want to make the most of, particularly with how they move, because it's going to affect and impact dramatically how they see their problems in the world. And of course, I have this Maximus Aurelius from Gladiator in there. Are you not entertained? That's really who Travis Kelce is. He is an entertainer first and foremost. Now he's a craftsman as well. So let's not get that twisted. He's not out there from an egotistical or arrogant standpoint necessarily, but he wants to entertain. He wants to be himself. He wants to put his fingerprint upon the game. And there is something to be said about that because we can harness it. And guys and gals, and Travis Kelce, if you're ever listening to this, props to you for doing it in the way that you do it, because it really shines and shows within his skill in the way that he solves problems. We see him on the left-hand side of the screen there, doing his dance, doing his celebration. You often see him after a first down, a touchdown. It really doesn't matter. Coming out of the tunnel, he is always giving the crowd something else to see, right? He is fully and honestly, authentically expressing himself. We see it within the movement problems themselves. Him hurdling guys, whether it's with leg forward or him leaping over or through tackle attempts. We see it time and time and time again. And it's something we featured here in our Movement of the Year analysis because it makes him who he is. And I would like to see that harnessed more in the training and learning and practice environment, probably more than he already currently does, because it's that which will be the driving force about how he would aim to fill in additional gaps or how he might be able to broaden or diversify his capabilities in solving movement problems. So that leads us to opportunity number one, opening up degrees of freedom across his human movement system. What do I mean by that? His perceptions, his intentions, and his actions. You guys have heard me talk about those things before. These dimensional levels of the human movement system are intertwined and interwoven when someone solves a movement problem. And that movement problem could be anywhere. But my first aim for him would actually to become less specific and actually drive him towards opening up degrees of freedom. Again, not just motor system and action degrees of freedom, as we typically would think, again, from Bernstein, right? The degrees of freedom problem. But I would love to see that degrees of freedom problem opened up to contain this perceptual and cognitive degrees of freedom as well. What someone is exploring and searching for, what someone might intend to do within a specific environment and when they're faced with certain problems, how someone might be able to continue to act in very abundant and degenerate ways. Now, some of these things Travis Kelce already does. Out on a football field, I talked about the novelty when surprises and unexpectedness and changes to situations and conditions arise. Travis Kelce is maybe as good as it comes at being able to coordinate a novel movement strategy and solution to fit the needs of that problem. But I would love to see this opened up even further. And to do so, I would actually personally try to take him to a place where he could express himself really without constraint, express himself in strategies or rather in movement problems that he isn't overly accustomed to. We see Ido Portal over on the left-hand side of your screen here, working with Conor McGregor and Gunnar Nelson back in the day. We're talking back in probably 2015, 2016 now, back when Conor McGregor was featherweight champion of the UFC. We really there giving Conor a chance to explore in very new and novel and creative ways, express himself through his movement,
but in an environment and in fashions that he isn't overly accustomed to. The same thing when we look at a couple of my buddies, Erwin LaCour from Natural Movement up on the upper right hand side of the screen there, and then Rafe Kelly, a person who's from Evolve, Move, and Play, a person that I've interacted with on his podcast, and he's been a presenter at my Sport Movement Skill Conference. These types of individuals presenting these types of activities where Travis Kelce is interacting with an environment that doesn't look, feel, act, and behave as though he's accustomed to. Maybe he's moving in nature, as we see with Erwin and Rafe. Maybe he's just moving in a way where he isn't overly he has to be so present and so in the moment because he isn't overly accustomed to moving in a respective way because he hasn't been faced with these problems. I believe it's these types of opportunities which could open up degrees of freedom. Again, not only of the motor system degrees of freedom, but perceptually and intentionally as well. And I have found in my time doing these types of activities with and alongside of National Football League players, it's the players like Travis Kelce who are already very willing to be open and honest and creative and expressive on the field that actually have the most to gain because they're just a ripe vessel for these types of activities. And I think Travis Kelce would take to them. Navigation through nature, maybe playing around in a park, moving in a way where they have to solve these movement puzzles that are very general, but still somewhat novel to them. And this would then set the tone for that enhanced aliveness. People know me as the guy who's obviously always trying to strive towards alive movement problems and aiming for those alive movement problems to look, feel, act, and behave or unfold like they will on an NFL football field. That aliveness brings unpredictability. It brings indeterminacy. It will contain opponents, layers of opponents, differing opponents, so on and so forth, right? And now I talked in the Mover of the Year analysis that I believe that tight end university that Greg Olson, George Kittle, and Travis Kelce have organized over these past number of years. I think the tight end university actually does represent an opportunity for growth and development of the entire tight end position. And I believe that it's an opportunity for growth for Travis Kelce himself as well, to take things from guys like George Kittle, who obviously is shown there on the picture on the slide, to take things from these individuals, to absorb what is useful in a Bruce Lee type of fashion, but also to be able to discard what is not and add what is uniquely one's own to one's craft, right? So learning from the other peers who play the position is a very ripe opportunity for growth and development. However, if you've seen any of the clips at Tight End University, it is often done, the work there is often done in highly decontextualized and isolated settings. Meaning usually the guys are running routes by themselves. Now they have a quarterback typically throwing them the ball. Sometimes it's actually reduced to a complete part method beyond that. But you got all these dudes standing around that could represent problems, layers of problems. Now I'm not going to go ahead and guess that any of these tight ends want to go cover their fellow tight ends. But what about bringing in linebackers, defensive backs, and the like to actually cover these guys, to actually do more than just run routes in these scenarios and situations, but actually set truly alive agility problems? I think that there's a huge opportunity here for Travis Kelce to drive this movement skill bus, this problem solver paradigm bus, if he were to make these small tweaks, adjustments, and modifications to the learning and training environment that he places himself in. The same thing will occur when he's training himself. Now, for the last number of years, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but he's been working predominantly with trainers to do things in very dead training environments, running on treadmills, doing plyos by oneself, looking for repeatability, right? Very things that could be conducive towards general physical preparation. There's certainly something to be said about that. However, Travis Kelce is at a place where he needs aliveness. In fact, I would argue that all 1,696 players across the league are in a place where they need aliveness, that those contextual movement problems are really that which what is needed, that many of those training means and methods that one would have utilized leading up to that point are no longer going to be able to be utilized with the same level of efficacy, right? The things that we typically see him doing are speed and change of direction oriented activities or drills. But what he needs is truly alive agility activities, not drills, activities. And it's there where he would be able to explore various options for solving both similar as well as dissimilar movement problems. That rep to rep, there would be more rep without rep. So no two problems would ever unfold in the same way, rep to rep, as you guys have heard me purport and preach from the rooftops before. And in doing that, one becomes more sensitive and attuned to information sources that they would use, detect, pick up, and then utilize to couple their movement actions in relation to. Now, in our Mover of the Year analysis, I've talked on a number of cases how Travis Kelce is very attuned and very sensitive, particularly to two information sources when he gets a ball in his hands. That would be speed, the relative velocity values of between him and an opponent or opponents. Typically, he seems to be very sensitive and attuned to those speeds, and he uses them to create cutback angles. He uses them sometimes in deceptive ways. He uses them to understand like when and where and how that stiff arm needs to come out. But also he uses bearing angles. So he's almost really connected to bearing angle and speed and combining them in most situations to coordinate and control and organize his movement solutions in relation to. However, there are two main information sources that it appears to me, as an outside observer looking in from afar, that he needs to become more sensitive and attuned to, or that he could stand to become more sensitive and attuned to. The first one is one that I've highlighted in a number of cases before for him, as well as for others, to be quite honest, which would be interpersonal distance, or the changing distance between himself and the immediate opponent, or himself and multiple opponents. What distance sets up that disposition or that complexion of that movement problem, and what does it specify for his opportunities to act? Oftentimes he gets too tight, too close, and he gets fixed and frozen, again, perceptually, intentionally, and from an action standpoint, with the movement solution that is going to emerge. And when he does that, this is why he relies on that stiff arm or a strength or power-oriented strategy, such as trying to truck someone, trying to go through or over them, right? Or lowering his shoulder, twisting his body. And these are things that are obviously we don't want to take away from him, because I would like to see him have as many strategies and solutions available to him to solve more problems, right? But there are times that I think he could organize a truly evasive, elusive movement strategy if he were to be presented with more of these types of problems. And he should be nudged, from my perspective, in ways of doing so. And that, to me, that's why I say opportunity 2A kind of builds on the aliveness. And I've talked before here that the art of being a sport movement skill acquisition specialist, a movement coach, isn't just about setting up the right learning environment with the right movement problems, manipulating constraints that call for a certain way of acting. Most of it, I mean, that certainly is part of it, but most of it is part, at least this place or space where we would attempt to facilitate, channel, one's movement behaviors to unfold in slightly different ways. Not telling someone how to move or what information they need to pick up or how they should aim to act, but instead nudging them and attempting to facilitate them. And when I say them, I mean the athlete, to find a movement strategy or solution to fit that problem on their own. So again, Jacobs and Michaels 2007 in direct learning and their theories around it. The education of attention or aiming to gain perceptual attunement and sensitivity to specifying informational variables, as well as then the education of intention. When you pick up a certain informational variable or going out and trying to get that informational variable, learning what you do with it or how it is that you can manipulate your own actions, calibrate your own actions in connection to that information. We've talked a little bit here at now in our mover of the year analysis about Travis Kelce being really reliant on that strength, power oriented or creative movement solution. And again, these are things that I'm not discrediting him for because it's part of the reason why he is deemed the most dexterous mover in the National Football League by me. But I would love to see him be more open and responsive to being able to behave in this evasive and elusive nature at times. It's in there. He does show it. He does express it. But there are some times that there are some missed opportunities or affordances, particularly because of that interpersonal distance and the posture and kinematics. That was one thing I didn't mention back here. Becoming more attuned to how the behavior of another would offer opportunities for the behavior of me to unfold, right? Posture and kinematics of opponents. Sometimes he just gets really fixated, as I've mentioned before, on putting somebody on his poster, and his movement solution looks almost like preconceived or almost contrived to a certain degree, almost premeditated. Like he wants to do this in this situation, as opposed to the movement solution just finding its way to what is. So it becomes connected and coupled to that movement problem. And so there are times that his eyes don't continue to search. They go down or they get fixated on that player in front of him. And it's almost like he's not even detecting information about how they're moving or information to the left and the right. He has to actively go act in a way to pick up perceptual information. But sometimes it appears as though he's not actually using that information to maybe remain open and responsive to what it's telling him about how he might be able to move. And this is where I've talked about skilled intentionality, which was our theme for 2022, right? This openness and responsiveness to a rich landscape of opportunities that are going to be emerging and decaying. They're going to go away and they're going to present themselves out of nowhere. And a performer, the most skilled performer, shouldn't ever be kind of handcuffed to one way of acting. But sometimes when he does get in these strength or power oriented fashions, he is almost like a little too tied into those that connection to that problem. So I would like to see him maybe explore in the training and practice environment more, and to do so he becomes really comfortable to what information he's picking up and being able to organize his perceptual degrees of freedom in a wider variety of ways, just as he has with his movement toolbox and the expressiveness of it. So not just always being reliant on speed or bearing angle, but when the problem calls for him to become more sensitive to interpersonal distance, or maybe gaps to the left and right, or behind the problem, okay, deeper and longer within the problem, or the posture and kinematics of opponents. These are things that I think that he could stand to become more attuned and sensitive to. And then with this, it would be our third major opportunity for even the most dexterous mover in the National Football League. This deliberate and intentional deceptive nature. Now, in route running, as I show in the bottom there where he's facing Justin Simmons really high level safety, obviously from the Denver Broncos. In route running, he often is purposely deceptive. We see him change his tempo and his pace. We see him change really frequently his angle and his path. We see him change center of gravity and levels or base of support. So the individual doesn't know exactly what's coming and when it's coming. But in agility scenarios and situations, when time is of the essence and there are more bodies converging to him because he has the ball in his hand. That's what I mean when I say true evasive agility scenarios. There are times that, like I said, he gets a little fixed and a little frozen. He misses opportunities to act. And sometimes he misses that opportunity to act because his head and his eyes are down or become fixed and frozen somewhere in space and time. And we see it here on this picture. We saw it in a couple of our deep dive movement videos for the Mover of the Year analysis. And this is something that's highly trainable, particularly if you are in more alive scenarios and situations. Now, fortunately for Travis Kelce, he is one of the most adaptable movers you will ever see. So he still often finds a functional movement solution, a movement solution that fits that respective problem. But it might not be as correct or as optimal. It might not be as functionally or behaviorally fit to that problem. And therefore, he might miss bigger plays down the field because he didn't solve the immediate local movement problem in a way that he might have been able to most efficaciously. So it's here, I believe, where he could stand to work on becoming more intentional with his deceptive nature when he has a ball in his hands, to catch opponents at their moment of helplessness. But in order to catch that opponent at their moment of helplessness, you have to be sensitive, attuned, and connected to that opponent's behaviors. Certainly, we will see Travis Kelce organize movement solutions in this way a number of times, actually, again, in our Mover of the Year analysis. But there are other times that when we look at all the reps that he has across both the 2022 National Football League season as well as all the others that came before, that I think that he could get a deeper, richer connection to this information about opponents' behaviors and use his own actions, act in a way that changes the way that someone else acts. And as you do that in this mutual reciprocal way, it creates new opportunities for you yourself to move. Now, I know Travis Kelce from having heard him speak. I know he loves the sport of basketball. That's pretty obvious. He played basketball as well. He wanted to play basketball in college, right? And you sometimes even hear him now when he's mic'd up talk about putting guys on his poster, showing his handles, making that guy miss, so on and so forth. I think that definitely translates into his form of life. Why he can be so honest, why he can be so authentic, why he can be so creative. However, I would implore him that when he has that ball in his hands, he looks to create these combinations of movement strategies, be more basketball-like at those times and places. Make guys miss, make them stand still, be more, I hate to use this analogy, but the Barry Sanders, like obviously these are two very distinct individuals, Barry Sanders being 5'9", 200-ish pounds, obviously Travis Kelce being 6'5", 255, right? Very different body scaled affordances. But Travis Kelce in his basketball-like nature, go play basketball on grass. Go make guys miss with the ball in your hands, but without being able to dribble or without having to dribble, right? And you still see this form of life from him, but I would like to see it lifted up and a greater emphasis and priority placed on it, particularly because Andy Reid and what they do at the Kansas City Chiefs is truly conducive to him being able to do that. And now, especially with how established he is, Travis Kelce, that is, I think he would have a true opportunity and a learning chance here to become more in this way. Aim to be deceptive. And then as you deceive, Look what you can perceive. And as you perceive other information and other opportunities because of your deceptive actions, now build movement strategies off of that. So those are the three main areas. They were actually truly four because we had 2A in there, right? Where I think Travis Kelce could become more sensitive, more intentional, and more adaptable, ultimately aiming to become more dexterous or to become one with the movement problems he faces. Now, again, full disclaimer, this is me watching from afar, and Travis Kelce still is, from my best estimation, the most dexterous and skillful mover currently doing it in the game today. But that doesn't mean that those most skillful and dexterous movers don't have things that we could aim to fill in their gaps if they were to be presented under the right learning environment and opportunity. Hopefully, some of the things that I addressed made some sense. Some of the things I suggested could be done or would be done if Travis Kelce were to ever join my learning environment. But if you have questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, go ahead and put them in the comment section below. I would love to interact with you around them. Obviously, if you like this video, give me the thumbs up, hit subscribe, share it with your people, as I often encourage you and invite you to do. And of course, if you're new here, go ahead and check out footballbeyondthestats.wordpress.com. Check out emergentmovement.com. Obviously, these are places that really are oriented around my form of life, how I see the world, and what we're trying to do to shift the paradigm for viewing American football in this way. So for our 2022 Mover of the Year, Travis Kelce, kudos to him. I'm Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, and I will see you guys next time.